All right, so today we're with the CEO and founder of Snapp Connor PR, Cheryl Snapp Connor, and she is going to help us understand when is the right time to hire a PR firm.
So it varies by company, but as a rule of thumb, I would say every organization should do its own PR for as long as it can. The early days mean PR expertise in terms of words of advice that keep you from tripping and connections. So strategy and connections are what you need. You should not be over expending your money for a done for you program at that stage of the game. And in fact, very many writers will tell you openly, I'd far rather talk to a founder than their PR firm, because the PR firm is just trying to get appointments, trying to hit check marks. I've had situations where people have blitzed me with rote pitches that have made me so upset that I even sent the email string in one case. That was kind of maybe a little mean of me. I found this author that they were pitching over and over again. By the third time, I'd said, please, this doesn't fit. Please, no more pitches. And they did it again. I found this author on LinkedIn, connected to him and said, I think you should see this email string. He was horrified. And this was for a column I was writing for Forbes. So he said, so I'm firing them on the spot. Can I hire you? And I said, no, at this point, that would be a conflict of interest. But in conversing with him, he really did have a good story. But we would never know. So don't do that kind of PR. Just get a little bit of advice, instruction, and in fact, just follow my columns.
Okay.
That would give people a whole lot of ideas and advice, because that is by assignment. That's what I write about, is how to do your own PR without an agency. Okay. Maybe that's how Forbes keeps me out of a conflict of interest. I don't know. But
okay.
Anyway, when
I like it because it's a very much like a Gary Vaynerchuk style of, when to throw in the right hook and not, like, just provides so much value that people would say, why not?
Why not? And when the time comes that you should hire an outside agency to handle the PR for you, you'll know. You'll be looking at the return on investment. Be metric driven.
Okay.
Really, really be strategic about this is the Clayton Christensen question. What is the job we are hiring this PR to do for us? And if people just say, well, awareness, then I'll say, okay, let's just have you run for political office, get in a hot tub with an underage girl, front page, job done.
Okay.
And then they laugh. And then they do start to think more strategically. Well, okay, it's not just awareness, but we want people to understand this kind of thing, or we want to be evident to the kind of people who need our value.
Okay.
So thinking that through, and then thinking through what are the means of communications that would handle that most effectively. Do that, measure it, and put the most emphasis on the things that bring you the most result. Look at the ways, with your PR team's help, that you can leverage what you're getting into the press or what you're publishing for lead generation, for the maximum possible outcomes, so that it's worth more than just the day it appeared in the publication and maybe the SEO hit, if it stays on the web after that.
How does a company decide how to measure obviously how many sales are coming from a source, and also the intangible benefit? Like Gary Vaynerchuk says, what's the value of your mom, right? What's the value of having a good brand? Like, how do you balance those two so that as a CEO or an owner of a company, you can say, okay, this is bringing returns?
Well, he's right. I like the way Gary Vaynerchuk thinks. That is pretty perceptive, but you can figure out how many touches it takes before somebody tips over and they do something with your company. Inside sales has said it's generally 6.
Okay.
There are companies I know in leadership development, for example, that say we're different. It takes 27. That's an awful lot of press.
Okay.
Because you want to be evident. And an easier way of thinking this through is, if somebody hears about you, however they heard about you, the next thing they're going to do is a Google search.
Okay.
So what's the evidence that's on the part of that Google search result page? Not the ads. What is the evidence? Is there uniform, compelling messaging in what shows up, both in your press releases and in whatever articles you've appeared in? And they'll look at your website too. Got
it. One of the interesting things I think about looking at Google searches is I used to work for an investment firm, and people would come. I assume the same thing would happen as if you're trying to do business with someone else, and they would come asking for money, and they'd say, well, I had done all these things, and I looked online, and I thought, well, if they had done these things, it would say it online and I couldn't find it anywhere. And I kind of feel that, Google and like LinkedIn, if you have more than 100 connections, where the wisdom of the crowd brings out the integrity.
Right.
And if they're not saying those things
That's
on these
right.
public forums, then these private resumes or like proposals that you're getting aren't truthful. Or if they're willing to actually put that on LinkedIn or in a public space where I can see where they're actually involved, that gave me a lot more confidence in working with them and investing further, or other business partnerships that I've done.
So look for reviews. Don't ignore reviews.
Okay.
And in the press, be consistent in your messaging, because if you find articles that a company's appeared in and they conflict with each other, that's a net negative. So all the work and investment you did to get into that press could be working against you if you don't get really thoughtful and intentional about what your message is before you get started.
Got it.
So, for example, if you were a small startup who was maybe a little cocky and said, what do I need a PR firm for? And one of the employees calls up TechCrunch.
Okay.
We've got this great story, and TechCrunch agrees. Wow. And it goes, there's not even about us on that website. They've mentioned only one of the two founders. All of a sudden, that story is out of the bag. And for this particular company, it did work out well. It had a happy ending. But these are reasons that just because you can reach out to a reporter and get their attention doesn't mean you're ready or that you should.
Got it. So personal story, you just mentioned TechCrunch, is years ago I started a fund called Boom Startup, and you guys actually got us
We did.
featured in TechCrunch. And it was kind of funny because all the investors I worked with are like, I gave you guys the right to do the exclusive to pitch it to TechCrunch, and everyone's like, John, that's ridiculous. This is stupid. But you guys knew what you were doing, and we had like 4,000 or 5,000 visitors over unique visitors over a 3-day period, which was phenomenal. And then about a week later, we were featured again. I think probably because of you guys on a colored, like front page, colored picture, everything, on the newspaper. And like traffic that day was like non-existent. So you guys knew the right audience. That exclusive was really important. And TechCrunch never would have featured us had we not listened to you guys.
So it was the right timing, it was the right message, and it made sense.
It's
But
the
if
right
an
harpoon.
employee had just gone nuts and now it's not a complete article or is even incorrect, or you weren't ready, that would be less than ideal.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for sharing, when's the right time for a company to hire a PR firm. And then join us again tomorrow for the next video in this, series on marketing topics.